Hi, I'm Noam Wasserman, Dean of the SciSim School of Business at Yeshiva University. I was a longtime professor at Harvard Business School, an entrepreneur, and a venture capitalist. I wrote the bestseller, The Founder's Dilemmas.
And I'm Charlie Harari. I've been working with companies for over 10 years. And that book, Founder's Dilemmas, and the challenges faced by the 10,000 founders in it is the basis of this podcast. We are delving into the issues faced by startups to help you avoid the pitfalls that claim so many good companies.
Let's get started.
Welcome, everybody, to Founders Dilemmas podcast. We are having an incredible conversation, learning a lot about life at the very, very, very beginning. Dean Wasserman, give us an update as to where we are.
No, absolutely. Great to be back with you, Charlie. And thank you to Ken Book and to Ari Wax for coming back on, being able to take us through. No, it's our pleasure. Taking us through the early days of their startup that had a whole bunch of issues for the first 6 to 9 months, and then acceptance to the most prominent of all of the pioneering incubators. We got into some of the ways that the early challenges actually, they think, worked in their favor to being able to be admitted to Y Combinator. And so they were taking us through the process. What do you get when you're inside the Y Combinator program? And Charlie, you were just teeing up the end of last episode, an observation you had about it and some of the things you wanted to delve into with it.
Yeah, I want to double click on what you said last episode about failure turning into success. And I think that there's a distinction here, and I'm positing for your thoughts, which is there's 2 types of failures. There's failure of product, and there's failure of market acceptance. And the failure of product is when you don't build a company that can deliver something to the customer or the consumer of real value. You cut corners, you don't think it through. And as a result, you're always going bankrupt, or you're always struggling because you're not really achieving whether it's an internal momentum or an external momentum, resources, etc. Then there's the failure of market penetration or market acceptance, which is nobody likes your idea. You like your idea and you think it's a good idea, but nobody's on board yet. And I'll give you a real example. The office market today in real estate, right? Nobody likes that idea anymore. Like, you can't get a loan if you have an office building, right? You can't get equity anymore. Days are done. There's a lot of office properties out there. And there's a lot of good office operators who really believe that the right property is going to come back, and at some point the office market will be strong again. So the product could be good, but the market's not there. And then something happens. People go back to work. Inflation changes. The consumer price index changes. Something happens in the market, and all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, "We need office." And that team, who's been going bankrupt 100 times, holding their assets together, wakes up one morning. They go, "Hey, who's got these assets?" And it's those guys that have always believed. My gut is that what you heard is the former. People that believed in their ideas, worked to make it work. Nobody patted them on the back. Nobody thought that there was a need. And either it was a micro need, some big company needed this thing, or a macro need. The market got smarted. And then at that moment, when the market needed something, those people that were head down, headstrong, believing in their product, all of a sudden the stars aligned. That's my theory, and I want to get your opinion on that.
It's funny you say that, because first off, great analogy, but Y Combinator actually has a word for this. And they look for the exact type of startup that you just mentioned, which is called a good idea that seems bad. And so Airbnb, for example, is a good idea that seems bad. Why is it a good idea? Because in retrospect, it looks so obvious, and it feels like that should exist in the world, right? But at the beginning, Paul Graham, he actually didn't want to accept the Airbnb founders. And it was only because of who they were as founders when they showed that in order to survive, they sold cereal boxes at the Democratic and Republican national conventions, branded after John McCain and Barack Obama, so that they could sell one cereal box type to each party. And that's how they were financing Airbnb. So once he found that out, he's like, well, even if it's not this Air bed and breakfast thing, they're going to figure something out that works. But so that was a bad idea, because who would think, right, you want to stay with strangers, right? DoorDash is another one. Like, who would think you want random people who might be able to just steal your food, delivering your food, so you have all of these bad ideas that sound good, or these good ideas that sound bad, as opposed to good ideas that seem bad, and there are lots of those, obviously. Like for example, the Everything app, right? Like the version of WeChat, but for the US, right? Everyone's tried it. There are a million Everything apps. It's never worked. People seem to be okay opening up different apps, right? It's a bad idea that seems good. So that's exactly what they talk about too, where you need to have your good idea that seems bad, such that when people realize it's a good idea, then you're the only one who's been working on it.
Right.
And if it's a good idea that seems good, then the space is already polluted with players.
I think that's the key point, because for those people that are listening, that are in this space, the reason why what you're saying is so critical is because there's nothing wrong with an idea that other people think is bad. Meaning, if they thought it was good, there would be competition. So when people come up with ideas and work on products and work in companies, and they use the outside noise or voices to determine the quality of their ideas, they're stuck in this quagmire of, if they agree with you, someone's doing it. And if they don't agree with you, you don't feel confident in it. And that middle ground is where great entrepreneurs lie. They lie in, we're doing market research. We're not out to lunch. We're thinking it through. We're speaking to people. This should work, but the world doesn't get it yet. Okay, the world doesn't get it yet. We're cool with that. That to me is so critical.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. But then you're in this interesting middle ground where you want to make, how do you understand which group you're in, right? Are you the delusional founder that has this great idea that nobody wants? Or will people want this once it exists, but now they really can't see it at all? And so trying to understand that customer feedback is definitely a game of chess.
Yeah. So to me, that's where mentors come in. Meaning this applies in everything, meaning it applies in one's own religious growth and in one's own career growth. Like at some point, as I'm sure you've studied or you've heard of the works of Daniel Kahneman, right? Everyone's biased, and a person is so biased to themselves that it's almost impossible to make a good decision based on yourself. Like you can't even find the biases in your own mind. And I wonder if that's the real value of a mentor that knows what they're talking about, which sounds to me what Y Combinator gives you more than anything in the world is not a guy's like sounds good. Like I was once, in the business world. No, someone who actually knows, who's lived a similar life, who swims in similar pools, who can look at your idea and say, keep it going or shut it down. And I think, to me, the ability and the humility to surround yourself with mentors who are not necessarily people that know you and love you and need you to look great, but really just know the industry and know the products well, will allow people to go, am I delusional, or should I keep on going? And to me, I think that's critical as you build a business.
Yeah, 100%. And what's great about it is lots of mentors, you feel when you ask for them, when you ask them for advice, that you're asking them for a favor, and you might not want to ask them all the questions you want. When it comes to Y Combinator, right, they're an investor of ours. They're financially incentivized for us to succeed, and that's obviously the best kind of mentor, even better than that person you grew up next to who really wants to see you succeed.
Right. Okay, so you just took us through the last episode, and then also a little bit here about the process that you went through in the Y Combinator program, the kickoff retreat, the group partner meetings every other week, group office hours every other week, the weekly socials, weekly speakers, and things like that. How did all of this in a tangible way shape your idea, your approach to founding, how you went into thinking through the next stages of Fluid?
You're going to talk about that call?
Yeah, we were at the retreat, and once we got into Y Combinator, it was a lot easier to speak to people in the industry. It wasn't easy, but it was easier. So we had a few conversations, and they were all positive, and we went into San Francisco feeling really good about what we were building. This is back when we were still working on the segments, and we had a call with a hedge fund manager, and he ripped into the idea. I mean, we were on the highest high, and then he brought us way back down. And it was the first thought that came into our head was, okay, like we have to think about this. We were demoralized. We were shocked.
Well, to put it in context, we were around an entire conference of people who basically were saying that the only way to really know whether or not you're onto something is whether or not people you're trying to sell to would use it. And this guy was like, I would never use this.
Yeah.
No one I know would ever use this. Like, you guys are crazy. You're wasting your time. I don't know why you'd give up your career for this. Like, he was really digging into it. He wasn't even trying to be nice, which in retrospect was pretty helpful because it made us it lit a fire under us to start talking to more customers. And so that was definitely of the utmost importance.
Yeah, we got back from the retreat, we got back to our apartment in San Francisco, and we sat down and we're like, will people actually trade this? Is this a little too messy? Is this too new? And then we had many more conversations, and that's how we got to the futures product.
Okay, very interesting. It was in some ways a classic example of the kenegdo that becomes the azer, the pushback, the critique that then is the invaluable part, the no that no one else is willing to give you with the why about why it's a no. That was the one that restarted it for you. But then even once you had that pushback, how did Y Combinator help shape how you then took that feedback and then acted on it?
So do you want to go for it?
I just want to add, what YC really specializes in is they let you make your own decisions, but their number one piece of advice, and this was the answer to a lot of our questions, was speak to customers. So yeah, with that, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so Y Combinator has a few mantras that they preach. One of them is build something people want, and another one is talk to customers. And so whenever you have a problem, right, so we realize we need to talk to customers to see if we're building something people want. And as we did that over the course of a few months, we realized first off that the structure we were using was awful and that a futures contract would be much more simple. Funds are much more used to trading it. We don't have to have this complex Series LLC Reg A offering structure that we were using prior. And then as we iterated on that and spoke to more people, it became clear that the markets that we thought people would be interested, which is segments of publicly traded companies, aren't really the markets that everyone is interested in trading, right? It seems like, or the realization we came to is that each stock, for lack of a better term, trades on a select number of KPIs, and that if we can offer a futures contract on those KPIs that investors who invest in this stock care most about, right, that will give us the highest odds of creating a liquid marketplace and of actually creating a product that's valuable to investors, both on the trading front and then also on the data front, right? Because we give a live look into what the buy side or into what funds and investors are actually expecting out of these key KPIs.
I think just to give some color, Ken mentioned this in the beginning of the last episode, but when we say KPIs versus segments as in iPhone or the iPad or Apple services, which are reported, but when we say KPIs, we're referring to those main metrics, those main fundamentals like revenue, earnings, margin.
Or Netflix subscriber growth, Spotify,
Exactly.
Premium users, stuff like that.
Okay, interesting. Slice it in a different direction of what you're really selling. Interesting on that front. So you talked about how the idea morphed over time and adjusted based on these things. How did you guys morph over time? Like, I assume that this was shaping you, shaping your approach, your mindsets, and other things like that. How were you different having gone through this program compared to when you went into it?
It's a good question. I think you go into building a startup assuming that, I think you only do it if you think you can, and that you're very capable and the team is great and you have a lot of self-confidence. And a startup really, it punches you and sees how much you can take. And I think that's something that I personally wasn't expecting. I kind of thought we have this great idea, it'll work, everything will be good. And it wasn't, obviously, and we're still trying to get to that better point, but obviously we've made a lot of progress. But in the beginning, there was a lot that made me sit back and say, like, is this something that we can build? Is this something that we want to build? But then you iterate and you come up with better ideas and better ways to approach the problem you're trying to solve. So that was that was my thought process on it. What about you?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, in terms of changes from the program, Y Combinator really taught us a few key things. Number one is, one of the things that was brought up a couple times was whenever you do something or whenever you're faced with a decision, you want to think, would a formidable founder do this? And what exactly a formidable founder isn't black and white, but it gives you this archetype to think about, right? Meaning, am I cutting myself some slack where I shouldn't here? Am I going overboard? What's the right thing to do, but not the right thing to do for a regular employee at a company, but the right thing to do for a successful startup founder. And so thinking in those terms has made me, in some decision-making capacities, a little less risk averse, which has definitely been valuable, I think. And on top of that, they teach you to have incredibly quick feedback loops. So prior to getting into Y Combinator, if we had to do something, we kind of just did it whenever we could. We got to it eventually, and maybe a few weeks or a month down the road, we'd have something. But Y Combinator forces you to iterate quickly, set goals and aggressive deadlines, and that means that you get stuff done way quicker, which basically doubles the capacity of your team, if not triples. And so that was also really, really helpful for us just as a team and from a productivity standpoint.
Okay.
This is an important piece. If I could just double click on this, because to those that are listening, I want to make sure that you get this. And I want to sort of speak about this a little bit and get your feedback, guys. I find that what happens in startups is that there's a transition that takes place from us to it, or from me to it. In that when something gets started, there's a lot of me involved in this. And negative feedback hurts. And getting those calls from hedge fund guys hurt. And you don't want feedback loops because usually they're not very positive. And you'll get to it when you can. And at some point, as the venture becomes real, it shifts and it becomes about it. And now feedback is your best friend. And you got to get it done yesterday because you have a whole new hill to conquer tomorrow. Why would I push it? And to me, that's a shift in the trajectory of a venture and the trajectory of an entrepreneur. And the litmus tests of, do I invite feedback? Do I delay tough things? Do I, protect myself? Is to me very indicative of where a founder is and where a company is.
100%. And one of the things that happened, at least to myself, I can't speak about Ben and Ari, but I think something similar also, which is that at least at the beginning, because I was the one who came up with the idea at first, I was very attached to building this retail app, and I was very attached to offering investments in YouTube but not Google, and that was going to be the core thing that we offered. And I was afraid of feedback saying that, listen, maybe there's a better idea out there. I didn't even want the better idea because I wanted my idea. And so once I think you phrased that really well, meaning once you open yourself up to the feedback, I think it's somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy, meaning at the beginning, whenever you start accepting feedback, right, the feedback's going to be negative. But if you keep on opening yourself up to feedback and react accordingly, right, that's what's going to cause the feedback to become a good thing. And I don't think you can get to the feedback being a good thing until you start accepting it when it's a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, and a lot of times founders, even more like double down on it. I've felt this pain. Let me go and find a solution to that pain. And then they're even more wedded to being able to keep pursuing the idea, to not shifting their focus to what the market really needs, as opposed to what they need. So it's going back to the us to the it that Charlie was talking about, where it can be accentuated from there. Also, it's a little bit of a mindset shift of my baby is perfect to no baby is perfect. There are flaws in every baby. Let us be able to then take the 90% idea and find a 95% idea. And so the hunt for the perfect and the assumption of the perfect can be like a very tough thing for founders to be able to shift their mindset about.
Yeah. There's also a lot of confirmation bias in that once you're invested in something, it's hard to see that it was wrong. I remember one time having this conversation with somebody, and he said to me, it was so smart. He said to me, you ever see somebody eat something? And if you ever, a guy's on a diet, let's say he's trying to lose weight, and then he eats a cookie, and someone takes the box of cookies and turns to see the nutrition label. And he's like, yo, don't show that to me. And they're like, why? he's like, I ate it already. He's like, so what? He's like, because once you eat it, you don't want to see how much fat's in it. Like you don't want to even hear that you made the wrong call because you've invested in the activity. And I think it's so critical in life, but it works. It works in your favor and it works against you, right? That's why investors are so critical. Like people don't realize that when you get a mentor investor, he or she is they're invested in you. There's a confirmation bias happening. They want you to win. It's only confirming their previous decision to invest in you. So there's so many good things. But on the flip side, when you build something or pitch something or sell something, it becomes so much harder to wake up one morning and go, oh my gosh, that I missed this huge hole and I was wrong.
Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, it's much harder, but I think our team also had another realization, which was one of relief, which is, oh my gosh, things weren't quite working before, and now we know why, and that enables us to make it work, right? And so if
like a light bulb moment.
Exactly, meaning if you keep on running in place and you don't know why, that's incredibly frustrating when you're putting in 16-hour days that aren't going anywhere. And so for us, right, when we realized our baby wasn't perfect, and maybe this other baby's even a little better, not great advice for parents, but when we realized that, that was kind of the paradigm shift where we were like, oh my gosh, right, it's not that we were doing anything wrong, we just weren't listening to the feedback. And so I guess it's this delicate balance of, like you were saying, Wasserman, about you're kind of married to the problem. So YC actually encourages that. YC says, like one of their mantras that they say is be committed to the problem, not to the solution. And so if you experience this pain point, if you experienced a real problem, right, that's a great starting spot. And if it's not catching on, that might be because your solution isn't the right one. But having a real problem, that's more important.
Yeah. Do you remember we heard that one before?
What was that?
We heard that before.
That's what Uri Levine was talking about, exactly that. But it sounds like there are a couple of things at Y Combinator that are there to have a tension that's emerging. Be very attached to the problem, but iterate really quickly so you can move away from it if it happens to be misreading the market. One without the other, I think, is the problem.
100%. And for us, the problem is still largely the same, which is the overarching problem that investors can't invest or can't get the exposure that they actually want. The solution mistake that we made was assuming that they wanted one type of exposure instead of another.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how did all of this up and down of the process and the things you went through affect your imposter syndrome? Did it have an impact on your being able to realize, I can hang and with the PhDs, I can be able to come through at the same, I can get to demo day as well as the MIT people?
You realize that
everyone's human
and everyone's going through the same struggles, and the company that you think is absolutely killing it with no issues is also struggling. And one of the benefits of YC is that you can actually speak to them and everyone's open about what they're going through. And are they going to hit their demo day goals? Are they going to be able to raise the amount they want to raise? Are customers liking the product? So I think that was very helpful. And then as you work on something more and more, you begin to understand it more and more. So building a startup there's not a defined path for it. It's more so you kind of have to figure that out on your own. And as you continue building and as you continue working with your team on it, you'll figure out a way that works. And then everyone else goes through that. So the imposter syndrome kind of leaves as you continue to build.
Okay, it's interesting throughout the process. A lot of times people from the outside, when they hear about these incubators, when they hear about Y Combinator, they think demo day. Demo day really hasn't been part of the discussion so far. Is it overwrought? Is it oversold as a big piece of the process, or was it also an important part?
I think demo day is very helpful. Essentially, the way we looked at demo day was it's a great way to set an internal goal. And we should hit these milestones by this day, which is essentially the culmination of YC of that batch. So we also, investors approach demo day as a battle to get into a round. So before demo day, we had a lot of investors reach out to us and say, can we meet before demo day? And then we would follow that process. And then demo day, you would present and more investors would reach out. So it's twofold. It helps with investing. It helps with raising your round and gaining interest. And then it also helps with setting those goals.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, the demo day is really just a culmination of everything that came before it, right? So if you want to do well at demo day, you have to do well during the program in the 3 months prior, and you have to be on a trajectory to do well after that. And so if you think in terms of demo day, then after demo day you might think, okay, we're done. Now we can ease off. But if you think of demo day as just kind of one plot in a long journey, right? It really just shows how well you set good habits during the quarter before.
Okay, just now look at your life now, how it's might be different. Has it impacted how much those investors are responding to you? Has it impacted any of the other things that were challenges before, but now are easier for you to be able to surmount?
Has demo day impacted?
No, just in general, having gone through Y Combinator.
Oh, so we didn't do any outbound for our recent raise, which we closed at the end of YC, but I would assume that investors would be more than willing to take a call because we went into YC. I think it was extremely helpful on getting on their radar and getting the, I guess, respect that you would want and willingness to take that call. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it definitely opened a lot of doors. Before YC, we were getting almost no investor inbound. Yeah. Then after YC, we got close to 100 meetings that we didn't have to reach out for at all. And so that was definitely a night and day difference.
Okay,
I would think for sure. I think that vote of confidence, seal of approval is a big deal.
Yeah, and it's also interesting in your LinkedIn profiles, at least I noticed on Ari's, that like right after company name Fluid, there's parentheses YC 2023. Like that's become in some ways a tagline to associate with the name of the company to be able to have it become part of the calling card.
Yeah, 100%. And every YC company kind of indicates the batch they were in at the top. And it's definitely a community also, meaning it's not just a signal to investors, but also just a signal to other founders. I think the YC community is just as strong or just as close-knit as the YU community, with the caveat being that everyone is majoring in the same thing, which is startups. And so that's as people from YU can understand, right? That's a really close-knit group, people you can reach out to anytime, even if you don't know them. Now imagine if all of them were in your industry. So that's been really great to have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, terrific. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for taking us inside that black box to be able to learn about how it shaped the idea, the company, and the people, and being able to help us understand your journey.
Thank you for having us.
It's an honor to have you guys on and good luck in your journeys. And for those that are going to be joining us in the future, we're going to have a lot more of these incredible episodes. We thank you both for taking the time. If anyone has any questions for anyone on this podcast, you can always email us at foundersdilemmaspodcast@gmail.com, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, and thank you both for having us, and thank you, Dean Wasserman, for always giving a helpful ear when we need it.
And yeah, thank you, Dean Wasserman. Thank you, Charlie. I would add one thing. We are launching a trading competition, so if anyone wants to check it out, fluidinvesting.com. You can trade exactly what we're building, launching in a month.
Best of luck with it.
Okay, thanks all.